A few years ago, when I was but a baby priest, when Kim and I were simply two crazy kids without two crazy kids of our own, I received a phone call from a number that I did not recognize. This was not at all uncommon. So I picked up the phone, wondering if it could be a parishioner in need. Then there was that unmistakable pause. An obvious sign that this was not family, friend, or neighbor. Still, for some reason, yet unknown to me, I stayed on the call. The nasally voice on the other end finally came through. Hello, Mr. Olson, this is Deborah calling our valued customers here at Charter. Without any room for me to interrupt, she kept going, Sir, I have to let you know that this call is being monitored for quality assurance purposes. As she continued, I wondered when she would take a breath so I could say I'm not interested in whatever it was that she was peddling, but still she kept speaking. What we are doing today is making sure all of our valued customers know that they're getting the best services at this time, okay? And for a second, I thought this was my moment, my chance, but she persisted about bundling services and faster internet, and I started to wonder, could I live into my baptismal vows? Could I really respect the dignity of this human being? And finally, she took a breath, and without thinking, the following words emanated from my mouth. I am too busy for this phone call. Before she even got a response out of her mouth, when would be a good time? Click. I hung up the phone. Conversation over. Those words that came out of my mouth, though, surprised me. I am too busy. Not that they were untrue, and even more so now they are true, but hearing these words forced me to recognize something unhealthy within me. Yes, we are all too busy to take calls from telemarketers, but I'm too busy might as well be the tagline for my life, and I think I am not alone. The contemporary American lifestyle generally and the Homewood way of life is very, very busy. And pre-pandemic, being busy was seen as a badge of honor. A few years back, there was a great article written by a man named Greg McKeown in the Harvard Business Journal, and it was entitled, Why We Humble Brag About Being Busy. Now, to humble brag is to talk in a subtle way about how much time we're spending on something, and in this case, how much time we're spending on a project or a presentation or some other report. And McKeown suggests that the even more disturbing trend is that when we get into a state of too-muchness, we try to fight it not by taking away, but by adding more. More technology, more programming, more stuff does not usually lend itself to a simpler life. McKeown is not alone in his assessment of the too-muchness of it all. There are others pointing to how we are busying ourselves with more and more soccer practice, more dance rehearsals, more pickleball games, more social clubs, more church services. It is as though we came through the pandemic, tried to keep doing everything we learned so that we could survive, and now we are trying to add back everything else we did before that we knew COVID-19 was even anything. Instead of taking time to rest, when we do have free time, what do? We fill it with more doom scrolling through bad news, keeping up with the Joneses on social media, or numbing our feelings away with one device or substance or another. Now, I don't speak just as an observer. I'm guilty of this too. Hi, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. There is another way, though. A few years ago, Brad's good friend and a pastor here in town at Grace Methodist Church, Stephen Ingram, wrote an open letter to the parents of his youth group, informing them that their children were in a bad place. As he wrote, they are more stressed, full of anxiety, depressed, suicidal, overcommitted, overmedicated, overworked, and over-extracurriculared, and it is killing them, sometimes literally. Ingram informed the parents that their children would probably not go to Harvard or play professional sports, but that is okay because when we finally stop pushing ourselves and busying ourselves and extracurricularing ourselves to death, when we finally shut down the devices and turn off the TV and finally let ourselves rest, we start to discover something that we cannot otherwise experience. We heard it earlier this morning when Todd read that beautiful passage from Genesis. It's the model that God gave to us as a great gift, a gift that we too often ignore. God spent this huge chunk of time, 6 whole ages according to Genesis, creating the earth, the stars, the sky, the moon, the waters, everything that crawls, walks, swims, or flies, and even us, human beings, made good, very good in the image of God. Yet something happened when God culminated this very good work. And on the 7th day, God finished the work that he had done, and he rested on the 7th day. God rested. God didn't do anything. Maybe God strung up a God-sized hammock and just chilled. I don't know. But God did not do anything. God just was. When was the last time that you just were? McCown and Ingram and Genesis encourage us to engage in a disciplined pursuit of less. Find the essential things that are crucial for the joy of life, then sand away the rest. It will probably be like cleaning out your closet. Messy at first, but eventually freeing after giving away the things that no longer belong to you. Yes, in giving all that away, you will feel free. And somewhere in the midst of this freedom, where less is actually more joy, more peace, more love of life, somewhere in the midst of this essentialist type of living, there is an opportunity. And we heard that opportunity in today's gospel lesson. This good news comes from the very end of Matthew's gospel account. The disciples have found themselves back where they started in Galilee. How fitting it was that Jesus pulled them full circle. Then he gave them what we call the Great Commission. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. Now, this commission might at first sound like being flies out the window, and we're back to going and doing. But there was one last thing that Jesus said in that commissioning. I am with you, always, to the end of the age. God is the great I am. God is within God's very being, just being. God and Jesus called his friends up a mountain. And earlier in this chapter of Matthew, the women who were followers of Jesus discovered that the tomb was empty, and after conversing with angels, they learned that the disciples were to rendezvous with Christ on a mountaintop. Yes, they are in Galilee where so much ministry happened, and yet they are called away from the madness of doing so that they could just be with Jesus. Now, some of those on the mountain worshiped while others doubted. But neither of these things can happen if we are too busy zooming and scrolling, doing and going. For us to even know what it is we are to do, we must first slow down and be with God in ourselves, in our internal reality, within our very souls. Well, speaking of reality, today is Trinity Sunday. You're probably wondering when I would get to that point. When ordained ministers do our best to express the truth of the ultimate reality, who is God, which is God's nature, Father, Son, and Spirit. Now, I've spent the first 10 minutes or so up here trying to tell you that we're not supposed to do something so much as we are to be with someone, namely with God. Thus, I believe our task on this Sunday and always is not to comprehend the Trinity, but to be with a relational God who is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. A God who is healthy community within God's self. A God who is both self-differentiated and self-giving at the same time. The trouble is that most of our lives we are too busy to experience anything other than the most urgent item on our to-do list, the most pressing family matter, the next bill, or whatever demands our attention in that moment. We become slaves to the urgent, such that we take no time to slow down enough to notice that we are already living within the life of the Trinity right now. We can't even think or contemplate the great mystery of God's nature because we're too busy. But to paraphrase Richard Rohr, a mystery like the Trinity is not something that we ever cannot understand. It's something that we can endlessly understand. But we have to have that space to contemplate. God is leaving breadcrumbs so that we can find our way back home. But if we're too busy to notice those, how will we ever get back to the table with God? God is already hinting at how we are already in relationship with the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. We will miss the greater glimpse of what a highly communal God looks like if we're too focused on even doing ministry, such that we never are with God, simply being in relationship. God, who is both infinite and incarnate, transcendent and immediate, eternal and processing. God who is creator, redeemer, and sustainer. God who is parent, child, and spirit is trying to speak with you. Are you too busy to take the call? Remember, the great I Am is with you always, even to the end of the age.